You had a right to go through a windscreen if you wanted. And in other areas where there is this balance between the liberal view of the nanny state and people interfering with what, and where the limits and borders of those are. But there are examples of the huge health gains that have come as a result of it. The fact we all have a much more pleasant environment. And I think if anyone was to strike up a cigarette in here, there would be a complete massacre as a result of it. So, yes, we can do things, we can change, we can lead in many respects. And there's many examples of that in Scotland. But I think that sometimes we look too much at our legal system as if it is a set of, crown jewels which it can only move glacially towards change. And I think the challenge now, and I can say this because of a runaway to Oxford, is let's look at it again. Let's have a second co-Brandon committee to look at the adult system. Let's look at the way our courts are divided between magistrates and sheriffs. Why do we have that division at that lower level? Why don't we look at problem-solving courts? But to do that, and before we can have that, we have to have alternatives that the public know work. You must know and have the confidence in those. And until we have that, then quite rightly the public will have hesitation before we have people out in their communities.
Thank you. Gerfec, what do you think?
Well, I have spoken about Gerfec, obviously, and what more do we need in terms of Gerfec? Well, I haven't been out looking and doing an inquiry into look at how you are all working together. But Lord Kilbrandon recommended that there should be an integration, a social education department, I think it was, an integration of education and social work, and there was a huge rejection of that. And my understanding is that some of that came from just politics, and I mean politics with a small p, that they really basically didn't want to mix. They didn't like the idea of professional mixing, etc., and there was some degree of hierarchy in that. I'm not asking where the hierarchy was, some of that will be self-perception. So I think, again, it's just the same as the rest of what I've had to say. It's about throwing aside your professional pride and what you're coming from, being open to listening and learning from other people from different disciplines, which you might not have perceived as an obvious one. And that seems to be, I mean, there's all sorts of, I'm sure someone out here is doing a huge amount of research, hopefully coming to Strathclyde University, on the cephalological influence in this. We have a lower population of people of that age group, but also what's happening in their lives that means that they're not committing crime in the same way. So some criminologists I know in America have said that far from social networking and the internet being an instrument which enhances criminality, that because kids are never ever bored, they're never bored. In fact, you can see them at crossroads, the lights are always doing something. That in itself has taken many of them off the streets. And you obviously got the phenomenon of gang problems in London, so it's clearly not comprehensive, but many of them, and they're not necessarily lonely, as we suggest, because they've got many friends. They're linking with many friends in that sense. And therefore, and also in the context of violence in the household, they're up out the way. They're not all sitting around the television when the father comes in on the Friday night drunk and starts to kick off. There are all these sorts of variables which come into. So who can say it could be voodoo for all we know? But I like to think that what's happening here is influence of the early intervention in children's lives, and I think that that's an incredibly brave thing to see happening. And I don't think it's sinister. I think that what we're doing is hopefully building a generation who will not repeat what we've seen in previous generations by the early actions and interventions that you take.
Thank you. We have time for just one or two further questions. There's an arm here and an arm right here. We start with yeah, we'll start with you at the front, and if there could be a microphone. Have you got a mic? Yeah. Is that kind of, yeah. Go right ahead.
As people don't stop having troubles before they're 18, after they're 18, I mean, what changes do you think need to be made to the adult criminal justice system to make sure it works for everyone?
Well, just what I've said there, I do think that we need to have a much stronger emphasis. I mean, sheriffs and magistrates, I don't think want to jail young people. I don't think they sit there in the morning wanting to put anyone into jail. But the problem is what tools are available for them. And so many of them will have sentenced someone to a deferred sentence. They may have sent them to a programme locally, a drink-related offenders programme. they may have dealt with it. But